I'm Natasha, your host for today's episode. If you want to improve your English listening and writing skills, you're in the right place. Today, we will listen to real-life stories about going grocery shopping in English. These stories will help you understand everyday conversations and build your vocabulary. Don't forget to press the like button to support our channel. If you are new here, we upload new videos every day to help you improve your English step by step. Before we start, let me ask you a few questions. Have you ever felt confused when you try to buy groceries in an English-speaking store? Do you know how to ask for help politely? Can you understand what the cashier says at the checkout? Think about these questions while listening to the stories. Today, here's the first story. John and his wife, Sarah, went to a grocery store last Saturday. John wanted to buy some fresh vegetables and fruits. When they arrived, John asked the store assistant, "Excuse me, where can I find the tomatoes?" The assistant smiled and said, "They are in aisle 4 next to the cucumbers." John thanked her and walked to aisle 4. Sarah was looking at apples and said, "These apples look very fresh. Should we get a few?" John replied, "Yes, let's get 3. Also, I need some bread." At the checkout counter, the cashier asked, "Did you find everything you needed today?" John answered, "Yes, thank you. Everything was easy to find." The cashier said, "Your total is $25.60. John gave the cashier $30 and waited for the change. The cashier gave him $4.40 back and said, "Thank you. Have a nice day." John and Sarah smiled and left the store. Now think about the words you heard. Aisle, checkout, total change. These are common words you will hear in a grocery store. Try to write these words down and practice using them in sentences. For example, the bread is in aisle 2, or my total is $30. Let me share a second story. Emily was shopping for a big family dinner. She had a list and was very focused. She asked a staff member, "Can you tell me if you have fresh salmon today?" The staff member replied, "Yes, we do. It's in the seafood section near the back." Emily went there and picked up 2 salmon fillets. At the dairy section, she was looking for milk. She asked another shopper, "Excuse me, do you know where the milk is?" The shopper kindly pointed, "It's next to the cheese." Emily smiled and said, "Thank you very much." At the register, Emily said, "Can I pay with a credit card?" The cashier answered, "Yes, we accept all major cards." After paying, Emily packed her groceries and said, "I'm glad I found everything." Listening to these stories helps you understand real conversations you might have in a store. Notice the polite questions, like, "Excuse me, where can I find," and "Can I pay with a credit card?" These are useful phrases to practice. Now, I want to ask you, what items do you usually buy when you go grocery shopping? Try to say your shopping list in English. For example, "I need eggs, cheese, and rice. Let's continue." Here's a short dialogue between 2 friends, Daniel and Peter, talking about their recent grocery shopping trip. Daniel said, "Hey, Peter, I went to the new grocery store near the park yesterday. It was really clean and quiet." Peter replied, "Oh, I've been meaning to go there. Did you find everything you needed?" Daniel nodded and said, "Yes, I made a shopping list before I went. It helped a lot. I bought rice, chicken, potatoes, and some vegetables." Peter asked, "Do they have fresh vegetables? I need some for dinner tonight." Daniel said, "Yes, they do. The carrots and spinach looked great. They also had a sale on onions and garlic." Peter smiled and said, "Nice. I always forget to check for sales. Did you talk to any of the staff?" Daniel replied, "Yes. I asked one worker where the cooking oil was. He said aisle 6 on the right side. He was friendly and helpful." Peter said, "That's good. Sometimes I get nervous speaking English in stores, but it sounds like they're nice there. Daniel said, yes, don't worry, just start with a smile and say, excuse me. It always works. Did you notice how Daniel and Peter used simple and clear questions? Like, where is the cooking oil? Or, do they have fresh vegetables? These are the kinds of questions you can use too. Listening to how others speak in real-life situations will help you sound more natural in English. Let me tell you another story. Helen is a mother of 2 children. Every weekend, she goes grocery shopping for the family. Last Sunday, she took her son David with her. They walked into the store and picked up a shopping cart. Helen said, let's start with the dairy section. We need milk, butter, and yogurt. As they walked down the aisle, David saw a big box of cereal and said, Mom, can we get this one? Helen looked at the box and said, let's check the price first. It's a little expensive today. Let's wait until it's on sale. They moved on to the bakery section. Helen picked up a loaf of brown bread and said, this will be perfect for breakfast. David said, can we get some cookies too? Helen smiled and said, okay, just 1 small pack. At the counter, Helen asked the cashier, can I use my loyalty card? The cashier replied, of course. Please scan it here. After paying, Helen packed the groceries into reusable bags. She looked at David and said, thank you for helping today. David replied, I liked shopping with you, Mom. Stories. Like this show, Everyday English in Action. You hear how people make choices, ask questions, and talk politely. This helps you build confidence and understand common phrases. Now let me ask you, do you ever go shopping with someone in your family? Try to say what you do step by step. For example, first we get a cart, then we go to the vegetable section. After that, we check our list. Let's keep going. Now I'll share a longer story that includes many useful phrases and real-life English you can use at the grocery store. Listen carefully and try to imagine the scene in your mind. You can also repeat some parts out loud to practice your pronunciation and speaking skills. Michael and his wife Laura plan to do a big grocery shopping trip on Saturday morning. They usually shop every 2 weeks because they both work full-time, and it's easier to buy everything at once. Before leaving the house, Laura said, let's make a list so we don't forget anything. Michael sat at the kitchen table and wrote down the items they needed. Laura read the list out loud. We need rice, flour, sugar, salt, cooking oil, chicken, eggs, bread, apples, bananas, lettuce, tomatoes, and some toothpaste. Michael said, that looks good. Do we still have milk and tea at home? Laura opened the fridge and said, yes, we have enough milk, but we're almost out of tea. Michael added tea to the list. Then they got their reusable shopping bags and drove to the supermarket. When they arrived, the parking lot was already half full. Michael said, looks like a lot of people are shopping today. Laura replied, yes, we should start quickly, before it gets too crowded. They grabbed a cart and entered the store. The first section was fresh fruits and vegetables. Laura looked at the bananas and said, these look ripe. Let's get 6. Michael picked up a bag and placed 6 bananas inside. Next, they looked for tomatoes. Michael said, these are a bit soft. Let's choose the firmer ones. Laura nodded and helped him pick out a few tomatoes. She also grabbed a head of lettuce and a cucumber. They continued down the aisle and found the bread section. Laura said, do you want brown bread or white bread this time? Michael replied, let's get brown bread, it's healthier. They turned into the next aisle where the cooking oil and rice were kept. Michael said, we usually buy the 5-liter bottle of oil, right? Laura said, yes, it lasts longer. Michael lifted the heavy bottle and placed it in the cart. They also picked a large bag of rice and a pack of sugar. As they continued shopping, Laura said, "Let's not forget the toothpaste." Michael said, "Yes, I remember. It should be in the personal care aisle." They walked over and found the shelf with different brands of toothpaste. Laura said, "Let's get the same one we used last time. It's gentle on the teeth." After about 30 minutes, they had almost everything on their list. Laura checked the list and said, "We still need chicken and eggs." They went to the meat section, where a friendly store assistant greeted them. Michael asked, "Do you have any fresh chicken breast today?" The assistant replied, "Yes, we do. It's right here." Michael chose a pack, checked the label, and placed it in the cart. Then they walked over to the dairy section. Laura opened the refrigerator and said, "The eggs are on the top shelf." She picked a carton and opened it to check if any eggs were broken. "These look fine," she said, and added them to the cart. They also picked up a pack of yogurt and a block of cheese. When they were done, they headed to the checkout counter. There was a short line, so they waited for a few minutes. Michael said, "This wasn't too bad. We were quick today." Laura smiled and said, "Yes, we worked like a team." At the counter, the cashier greeted them with a smile and said, "Good morning. Did you find everything you were looking for?" Michael replied, "Yes, thank you. Everything was well organized." The cashier scanned each item while Michael and Laura packed the groceries into their bags. When the cashier said the total, Michael took out his debit card and said, "Can I pay with card?" The cashier said, "Yes, please insert your card here." After the payment was complete, the cashier handed them the receipt and said, "Have a great day." Michael said, "You too, thank you." Laura added, "Thanks for your help." They took the bags and walked back to the car. On the way home, Laura said, "I like this store. It's clean and the staff are always polite." Michael replied, "Yes, and it helps that we made a list. Shopping was easy." Now let's take a moment to talk about the useful language you just heard. Did you notice how Michael asked, "Do you have any fresh chicken breast today?" That's a polite and clear way to ask a question. Laura also said, "Let's make a list so we don't forget anything." These are simple, useful phrases that you can use when you shop in English. Think about your own experience. Do you make a list before shopping? What do you usually buy? Try to say your answer in English. For example, I usually buy bread, milk, eggs, and rice. I go shopping every weekend with my family. Let's keep going with a detailed story that will help you learn even more useful English for grocery shopping. This time, we'll focus on a family shopping trip and how they speak to each other, ask for help, and make decisions. Listen carefully and try to repeat some sentences out loud after me. This will help your speaking and listening at the same time. David and his wife Sarah live in a small town with their 3 children. Every Saturday morning, they go grocery shopping as a family. They believe that shopping together teaches their kids how to make good choices and also helps the children learn how to speak politely to others in public. On a bright Saturday morning, Sarah woke up early and made breakfast for everyone. After they ate, she said, "David, can you help me make the shopping list?" David brought a pen and a small notebook. He sat at the kitchen table and said, "Okay, let's write it down. What do we need this week?" Sarah said, "We need vegetables, fruits, some chicken, cooking oil, eggs, flour, and some cleaning supplies." Their oldest daughter, Emma, came into the kitchen and asked, "Can we get some apples? I want to take them to school for snacks." Sarah said, "Of course, apples are on the list." Then their son, Jacob, said, "Can we get peanut butter, too?" David smiled and said, "Yes, we can add it to the list, but just 1 jar." After writing everything down, they grabbed their shopping bags and drove to the supermarket. When they arrived, David parked the car and the kids helped take out the bags. Sarah said, "Stay close to us and help put things in the cart. Let's be quick and careful." They entered the store and the first section was the produce area. Sarah said, "Let's start with vegetables." She picked up a bag of potatoes, a few carrots, and a bunch of spinach. She checked each item carefully. Emma asked, "How do you know if the carrots are fresh?" Sarah answered, "If they're firm and have a bright orange color, they're fresh." Jacob helped by placing the items into the cart. Next, they went to the fruit section. David picked up some bananas and said, "These are still a bit green. Should we take them or find some that are riper?" Sarah said, "Let's take both. The green ones will be good for next week and the ripe ones we can eat now." Emma chose a bag of apples, and Jacob asked if they could also get oranges. Sarah said, "Yes, oranges are good for your health, especially in winter." They added the fruits to their cart and moved on to the meat section. David said, "We need chicken. Do you want breast or thigh pieces?" Sarah replied, "Let's get both. We can use the breast for sandwiches and the thighs for dinner." He picked 2 packs and checked the expiry date. He said, "These look good. Let's take them." Then they went to the aisle where oil, flour, and other cooking supplies were kept. David picked a bottle of sunflower oil and asked, "Do you want to get the same brand as last time?" Sarah said, "Yes, it's good quality." She also picked a pack of flour and checked the price. "This one is on sale," she said. "Let's take it." As they walked through the aisles, they picked up peanut butter, cereal, sugar, and a few canned goods. The children helped by carrying some lighter items and placing them into the cart. Suddenly, Sarah realized they forgot to get eggs. She said, "Let's go to the dairy section before we forget again." They walked over, and she picked a carton of eggs. She opened the box and checked each egg to make sure none were broken. David picked up some yogurt and cheese, and Emma added a bottle of fresh juice to the cart. When they were almost done, they looked at the cleaning supplies. Sarah said, "We need dish soap and laundry detergent." David picked the soap and read the label. He said, "This one says it's gentle on hands. Let's try it." Sarah found a detergent she liked and added it to the cart. They were now ready to check out. They walked to the front of the store, and there were 3 cashiers. One counter had a short line, so they joined it. While waiting, Emma said, "I like shopping when we all come together. It's fun." Sarah smiled and said, "Yes, and it's good practice too. You learn how to choose healthy food and how to talk to people politely." When it was their turn, the cashier greeted them with a smile and said, "Good morning. Did you find everything okay?" David said, "Yes, thank you. Everything was easy to find." The cashier started scanning the items while Sarah and the children packed the groceries into bags. As the total appeared on the screen, David took out his card and said, "Can I pay with debit?" The cashier nodded and said, "Yes, please insert your card." After the payment, the cashier handed them the receipt and said, "Have a nice day." Sarah replied, "Thank you. You too." They carried the bags to the car and put everything in the back seat. On the drive home, Sarah said, "We did a great job today. We stayed on budget and we got everything we needed." David said, "It helps when we work as a team." Now, let's think about some of the useful phrases and questions from this story. Sarah asked, "How do you know if the carrots are fresh?" That's a good question you can ask when you're shopping. David asked, "Do you want the same brand as last time?" This is helpful when you're choosing between products. And the cashier asked, "Did you find everything okay?" This is something you will often hear in English-speaking stores. If you go shopping in an English-speaking country, you can use many of these phrases. For example, if you cannot find something, you can say, "Excuse me, where can I find the cooking oil?" Or, "Do you have fresh eggs?" You can also ask, "Is this on sale?" Or, "Can I pay with card?" Try to say some of these phrases out loud now. Even if you are at home, speaking out loud helps you get used to the sound of English. It builds your confidence. All right, let's continue with a longer story. This one is about a shopping trip where Tom, his wife Emma, and their son Ben go to the supermarket. It includes more details about asking for help, comparing prices, and solving a problem at the checkout. Listen carefully and try to learn the useful language. One Sunday morning, Tom said to Emma, "We need to do grocery shopping today. The fridge is almost empty." Emma agreed and said, "Yes, I will help you make a list." They sat together at the kitchen table, and Tom took out a notebook. Emma said, "We need vegetables like carrots, potatoes, onions, and broccoli. We also need fruits, chicken, eggs, milk, and bread." Tom added, "Don't forget cleaning products like dish soap and laundry detergent." Their son Ben joined them and said, "Can we get some cookies and juice?" Emma smiled and said, "Okay, we can add those, but just one pack of cookies." After they finished the list, they got ready and drove to the supermarket. When they arrived, the parking lot was busy. Tom said, "It looks crowded today. Let's park far and walk to the store." Emma said, "Good idea. We can get some exercise." Inside the store, they grabbed a shopping cart and started in the produce section. Emma picked up some carrots and checked them. She said, "These carrots look good. They are firm and bright orange." Tom picked some potatoes and onions. Ben helped by putting the items into the cart. When they moved to the fruit section, Tom said, "Look at these apples. There are red and green ones. Which do you want?" Emma said, "I like red apples, but green ones are also healthy." Ben said, "I want some bananas too." Tom said, "Let's take 3 bunches of bananas." Emma added a few oranges and grapes. Next, they went to the meat section. Emma said, "I want to buy chicken breasts and some ground beef." Tom asked the store assistant, "Can you tell me if the chicken is fresh today?" The assistant replied, "Yes, it arrived this morning." Tom picked a pack and checked the label. He said, "The expiry date is next week. It's good." Emma also chose a pack of ground beef. After the meat section, they went to the dairy aisle. Tom picked up milk and eggs. Emma found yogurt and cheese. Ben said, "Can I get some chocolate milk?" Emma said, "Only 1 bottle, Ben." Tom laughed and added the chocolate milk to the cart. In the aisle with cooking supplies, Emma looked at the oils. She said, "We usually buy olive oil, but this one is on sale. Should we try it?" Tom looked at the price and said, "It is cheaper, but I think olive oil is better for cooking." Emma agreed, and they put the olive oil in the cart. Then, they went to the baking section. Emma picked flour and sugar. Tom checked the prices. He said, "The sugar here is more expensive than at the smaller store down the road." Emma said, "We should buy less sugar this time to save money." Before heading to the checkout, they stopped at the cleaning supplies. Emma picked dish soap and laundry detergent. Tom said, "Let's buy the brand we know. It works well." Emma nodded and put the items in the cart. At the checkout line, they waited patiently. When it was their turn, Tom started unloading the cart. The cashier scanned each item and said the price. Tom asked, "Can I use my card to pay?" The cashier said yes. When Tom tried to pay, the machine did not accept his card. He said, "The card is not working. Can I pay with cash?" The cashier said, "Yes, you can." Tom reached into his wallet and paid with cash. Emma said, "It's okay. Sometimes technology does not work." Ben said, "I am hungry. Can we buy some snacks next time?" Tom smiled and said, "Yes, but only healthy snacks." After paying, the cashier said, "Thank you for shopping with us. Have a good day." Tom and Emma said, "Thank you, you too." They took their bags and went back to the car. On the way home, Emma said, "That was a good trip. We got everything on our list." Tom said, "Yes, and next time we can try to buy some things at the smaller store to save money." Now let's look at some important phrases from this story. When Tom asked, "Can you tell me if the chicken is fresh today?" he was asking for information politely. When Tom said, "Can I pay with cash?" he was solving a problem clearly. Emma said, "We should buy less sugar this time to save money." This is an example of making a decision based on price. You can use these phrases when you shop in English. If you want to ask for help, you can say, "Excuse me, can you help me find the olive oil?" Or, "Is this product fresh?" If you have a problem at the checkout, you can say, "My card is not working. Can I pay another way?" Try to practice these sentences now. Say them slowly and clearly. Speaking English often will help you become more confident. Listening to stories like this will help you understand real-life conversations better. Next, we will hear another story about shopping and how to compare products before buying. Keep listening. Now let me share another detailed story. This one is about Sarah, her husband David, and their two children, Lily and James. They go grocery shopping at a large supermarket on a Saturday afternoon. This story will help you learn useful words and expressions you can use while shopping. It will also help you understand how to speak clearly and politely in everyday English. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and Sarah said to David, "We need to buy groceries for the week. There's not much food left at home." David nodded and said, "You're right. Let's make a list before we go." They sat at the dining table with a pen and paper. Sarah asked, "What do we need?" David said, "Let's check the kitchen." They opened the fridge and saw that the milk was low, there were only a few eggs, and the bread was old. Sarah wrote down, "Milk, eggs, bread." Then she added more items: tomatoes, cucumbers, chicken, rice, and some snacks for the kids. Lily and James were playing in the living room. Sarah called them and said, "We're going to the supermarket. Do you want to come?" Lily smiled and said, "Yes. Can I help pick the fruit?" James said, "I want to get some juice." David smiled and said, "Okay, but only healthy choices." They all got into the car and drove to the supermarket. When they arrived, Sarah said, "Let's take a cart and start with fruits and vegetables." They walked to the produce section. Lily saw apples and said, "These apples look nice. Can we buy some?" Sarah said, "Yes. Pick 6 red apples and put them in the bag." James saw bananas and pointed, "We need bananas too." David said, "Let's get 2 bunches. Bananas are good for snacks." Sarah looked at the tomatoes and said, "These tomatoes are soft. Let's choose the firm ones." David picked a few cucumbers. He said, "These are fresh and not too big. They are good for salad." Sarah added lettuce and carrots to the cart. She said, "We'll use these for dinner tomorrow." Next, they went to the meat section. Sarah said, "We need chicken and maybe some beef." David looked at the shelves and said, "This chicken looks fresh. The date is good. Let's get 2 packs. Sarah checked the beef and said, "It's a bit expensive, but we can buy a small pack for stew." They placed the meat into the cart and moved on. At the bread section, Sarah looked around and said, "There are many types of bread. Do we want whole wheat or white?" David said, "Whole wheat is healthier. Let's buy that." Lily said, "Can we get some bread rolls too?" Sarah said, "Yes, but only 1 pack." Then they went to the dairy section. Sarah picked a large bottle of milk. James said, "We need cheese too. I like the sliced one." Sarah picked a pack and said, "This one is on sale. It will be fine for sandwiches. David added a pack of butter to the cart. Now it was time to buy rice and pasta. David said, "Let's get one big bag of rice. It will last longer." Sarah agreed and picked a pack of pasta too. She said, "We can use this for an easy dinner next week." They turned into the snacks aisle. Lily saw a box of crackers. She said, "Can we get this one?" Sarah said, "Okay, but no chips or candy." James saw juice boxes and said, "This one has apple juice." Sarah read the label and said, "There's no added sugar. We can buy one pack." David checked the list and said, "Do we need anything else?" Sarah said, "We need soap and dishwashing liquid." They went to the cleaning aisle and picked those items. Sarah said, "Let's stick to the brand we trust. It works well." Finally, they walked to the checkout. The line was a bit long, so they waited. Sarah looked at the magazines but did not buy any. When it was their turn, David helped put the items on the belt. The cashier smiled and said, "Hello, did you find everything you needed?" Sarah replied, "Yes, thank you, just these items." The cashier scanned the groceries and said the total. David used his debit card to pay. It worked without a problem. The cashier said, "Would you like a receipt?" David said, "Yes, please." The cashier handed him the receipt and said, "Have a great day." Sarah said, "Thank you." "You too." They packed the groceries into bags and returned to the car. On the way home, Sarah said, "I'm glad we got everything. Now we don't have to go out again for the next few days." David said, "It's always easier when we make a list first." Lily said, "I liked helping pick the fruit." Let's talk about some useful language from this story. When Sarah said, "These tomatoes are soft. Let's choose the firm ones," she was making a choice based on freshness. When the cashier said, "Did you find everything you needed?" this was a polite question that you will often hear in stores. David answered with, "Yes, thank you. Just these items," which is a good way to respond. If you are shopping and need help, you can ask, "Excuse me, where can I find the bread?" Or, "Is this product on sale?" If something is too expensive, you can say, "Do you have a cheaper option?" Or, "I will look for something else." You can practice saying these sentences out loud. Speaking clearly and slowly will help people understand you. Listening to real-life situations like this will also help you understand more English when you hear it in shops or public places. Let's now listen to another shopping example. This time it's about someone buying food from a small local store instead of a big supermarket. Keep listening to learn more useful phrases and expressions. Now let me tell you another real-life story. This one is about a man named Thomas. He lives in a quiet neighborhood and usually goes grocery shopping at a small local shop near his house. He prefers small stores because they are not crowded, and he can finish his shopping faster. One morning, Thomas opened his fridge and noticed that he had almost no food left. The milk was finished, the bread was dry, and there were no vegetables. He looked in his cupboard and saw that he was also low on rice and lentils. So he picked up his shopping bag, took his wallet, and walked to the local grocery shop. As he walked, he said to himself, "I need to buy food that can last for the whole week. I should not forget anything today." When he entered the store, the shopkeeper, Mr. Johnson, greeted him and said, "Good morning, Thomas. How are you today?" Thomas smiled and said, "Good morning, Mr. Johnson. I am doing fine. I need to buy a few things for the week." Thomas picked up a small basket and started with the fruit section. He saw fresh oranges, bananas, and apples. He picked 6 oranges and 4 apples and put them in a paper bag. Then he moved to the vegetables. He saw potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and spinach. He picked a few large potatoes, a small bag of onions, and some ripe tomatoes. He also chose a bunch of fresh spinach because he wanted to make soup for dinner. He placed them carefully in the basket. Then he walked to the shelf that had grains and pulses. He picked up a bag of rice and another of lentils. He checked the labels to make sure they were not expired. He also took a small packet of salt. After that, he went to the dairy section and took 1 bottle of milk and a pack of plain yogurt. He liked eating yogurt with his lunch, especially on hot days. He remembered that he needed oil. He went to the cooking section and picked a small bottle of sunflower oil. It was on discount. He also saw flour and said to himself, "Let me buy 1 bag. I can make bread at home." He added the flour to his basket. Next, he moved to the bread shelf and picked a fresh loaf of brown bread. He checked the date printed on the package. It said it was baked that morning. Thomas liked fresh bread because it tasted better. He then walked to the shelf where they kept tea and sugar. He picked a small packet of tea leaves and a medium packet of sugar. Just as he was about to go to the counter, he saw a small shelf with soap and toothpaste. He checked his list again. It said, soap and toothpaste. He smiled and picked 1 bar of soap and a tube of toothpaste. Now his basket was full. He went to the checkout counter and placed all the items on the counter. Mr. Johnson scanned each item and said, "That will be $46. Thomas gave him the money and waited for the change. Mr. Johnson gave him the receipt and said, "Thank you, Thomas. See you next time." Thomas said, "Thank you. Have a good day." He packed all his items in the bag he had brought from home. As he walked back, Thomas thought about how useful it is to make a list before shopping. He said to himself, "When I write down everything I need, I don't forget anything. I also save time." When he reached home, he put the groceries on the kitchen table and started to put them away. He placed the milk and yogurt in the fridge. He kept the potatoes, onions, and flour in a dry corner. He placed the rice and lentils in jars. Then he washed the spinach and tomatoes. He cut them and started to make soup. As the soup cooked, he boiled some rice and warmed a piece of bread. Soon, his meal was ready. He sat down and enjoyed his lunch. He felt proud that he could prepare a healthy meal with the items he had just bought. Let's look at some of the useful language from Thomas's story. When the shopkeeper said, "Good morning, Thomas. How are you today?" That was a friendly greeting. You can use this when you see someone you know in a shop. When Thomas said, "I need to buy a few things for the week," that is a common way to start a conversation in a store. Also, notice how Thomas checked the expiry dates before buying milk and bread. This is important when you buy groceries. You can say, "Can I check the date?" or "Is this fresh?" if you are not sure. When he said, "I should not forget anything today," that shows he had a plan. It is always helpful to make a list. You can write milk, eggs, rice, tomatoes, and read from the list while shopping. This helps you stay focused. When he paid at the counter, Mr. Johnson said, "That will be $46. This is a polite way to tell the total price. Thomas gave the money and said, "Thank you. Have a good day." Always being polite is very important in daily life. You can practice these sentences aloud. For example, try saying, "Excuse me, where can I find the rice?" Or, "Do you have any fresh tomatoes today?" These simple questions will help you speak with confidence in real situations. Now let me share one more shopping story. This one is about a man named Daniel. He is married and lives in a small town. One evening, his wife Emily told him they were out of some kitchen items. She said, "Daniel, we need cooking oil, sugar, and tea. Can you go to the shop and buy them?" Daniel said, "Sure, I will go now before it gets dark." He put on his jacket, took some money, and walked to the corner store. The store was small, but it had all the basic items. The shopkeeper, Mr. Clark, knew Daniel well. When Daniel walked in, Mr. Clark said, "Hello, Daniel. Looking for something special?" Daniel smiled and said, "Hi, Mr. Clark. Just a few items today. My wife sent me." Daniel went to the shelves and picked a bottle of cooking oil. He read the label to see if it was sunflower or vegetable oil. He chose sunflower oil because his wife preferred that. Then he looked for sugar. There were two sizes, a small packet and a big one. He picked the big one because it would last longer. He looked for tea and saw two types, loose tea leaves and tea bags. He knew Emily liked tea leaves, so he picked that one. Then he remembered they also needed some salt. He checked the shelf and found a medium pack. He placed all items on the counter. Mr. Clark said, "All done?" Daniel said, "Yes, that's all for today." Mr. Clark calculated the total and said, "That will be $15. Daniel paid and said, "Thanks. Good night." Mr. Clark smiled and said, "Take care, Daniel." Daniel walked home quickly. When he got back, Emily said, "Thank you. Now I can finish making dinner." Daniel said, "It was easy. Mr. Clark had everything we needed." This story also shows useful phrases. When Daniel said, "Just a few items today, my wife sent me," he used a clear and polite sentence. When he said, "I will go now before it gets dark," that showed planning. Practicing these kinds of everyday sentences will help you understand and speak English better. Listening to real situations makes your brain more ready to use the same phrases when you need them. You can now try. Let me share another full shopping story that is simple, clear, and full of useful words for your English practice. This one is about a woman named Sarah. She is a mother of 2 children. She lives in a small house with her husband, Peter, and their kids. Every Sunday morning, Sarah goes grocery shopping. Sunday is her shopping day because her husband is home, and he can take care of the kids while she is away. She likes to shop early in the morning when the store is not busy. One Sunday morning, Sarah woke up at 6:30. She took a shower, got dressed, and made a list of everything she needed. Her list had eggs, milk, rice, chicken, apples, bananas, onions, garlic, carrots, and cereal. She also needed a bottle of oil and a bag of flour. She made a cup of tea, drank it quickly, and then picked up her reusable shopping bags. She always brings her own bags because it helps the environment, and she does not want to pay extra for plastic ones. She said goodbye to her husband and walked to the supermarket. The supermarket was about 15 minutes from her house. It was a large store with many different sections. When she entered, she picked up a shopping cart and began to walk down the aisles. The first section was the fruit and vegetable area. Sarah stopped and looked carefully at the apples. Some were red, some were green. She picked 4 red apples and 5 bananas. Then she looked at the carrots. They were fresh and bright orange. She took a bunch and placed them in her cart. Next, she went to the section with onions and garlic. She took a small bag of onions and picked up 3 garlic bulbs. She checked her list again. The next item was rice. She walked to the grain section. There were many types of rice: white rice, brown rice, basmati rice, jasmine rice. Sarah chose a medium-sized bag of white rice because it was on sale. Then she picked a small bag of flour and added it to the cart. She turned into the meat section. There was beef, lamb, fish, and chicken. Sarah did not want beef or lamb today. She looked at the chicken. There were small pieces in trays. She chose 2 trays of chicken breast and checked the date. It was fresh, and the price was good. She smiled and placed them in her cart. After that, she went to the dairy section. She picked a carton of milk and a dozen eggs. She also saw cheese, but it was not on her list, so she left it. Sarah wanted to buy only what she needed. She walked slowly to the breakfast section and found cereal. Her children liked cornflakes, so she picked 1 large box. Then she remembered she still needed oil. She walked to the cooking shelf and found many bottles. She chose a small bottle of vegetable oil. Sarah checked her list again. She had everything. She went to the cashier and waited in line. When it was her turn, the cashier smiled and said, "Good morning. Did you find everything?" Sarah said, "Yes, thank you." The cashier scanned each item and put them into bags. The total was $62. Sarah paid with her bank card. The cashier gave her the receipt and said, "Have a nice day." Sarah smiled and said, "Thank you, you too." She picked up her bags and walked home. The weather was cool and sunny. As she walked, she thought about the meals she would make. She planned to cook rice with chicken and carrots for lunch. For dinner, she would make soup with onions and garlic. She would give the kids cereal with milk for breakfast the next morning. When she reached home, her husband opened the door and said, "You're back. Let me help you with the bags." Sarah said, "Thanks, I bought everything we need." She placed the bags on the kitchen table and started to put things away. She put the milk and eggs in the fridge. She placed the apples and bananas in the fruit bowl. She kept the rice and flour in the pantry. She put the chicken in the freezer. After everything was in place, she washed the carrots and started cooking. Now let's take some useful expressions from Sarah's story. When she made a list, she said, "I need eggs, milk, rice, chicken." This is a good way to practice food vocabulary. You can also say, "I need to buy," or "I have to get." When she walked into the store and picked up a cart, she started at the fruit section. This is common in many stores. First fruits and vegetables, then other things. When she said, "I checked the date," that is something you should always do. If the food is not fresh, do not buy it. You can say, "Is this fresh?" or "What is the date on this?" to someone at the store. At the cashier, she said, "Yes, thank you," when asked if she found everything. You can also say, "Yes, I got everything I needed," or "Yes, it was all easy to find." These are polite and useful answers. Now let's look at another short shopping experience. This one is about a man named George. He works at a factory and comes home late in the evening. One night after dinner, his wife Anna said, "George, we forgot to buy salt and onions. Can you please go to the shop?" George was tired, but he said, "Sure, I'll go now." He took his wallet and a small cloth bag. There was a small grocery store 5 minutes away. When he got there, he saw the shopkeeper, Mr. Baker, who was closing the shutters. George said, "Mr. Baker, do you have a minute? I need to buy a few things." Mr. Baker said, "Of course. What do you need?" George said, "Just a packet of salt and some onions." Mr. Baker opened the shelf again and handed him a packet of salt. Then he took out a basket of onions and asked, "How many?" George said, "5, please." Mr. Baker gave him 5 onions and said, "That will be $3. George paid and said, "Thanks a lot. Good night." Mr. Baker smiled and said, "Anytime, George." When George got home, Anna was happy. She said, "Thank you. Now, I can finish making the curry." George said, "It's no problem." This shows how common and simple conversations in a grocery shop can be. You can practice these words and phrases every day. Say them slowly. Repeat them again and again. The more you hear and speak them, the more natural they will become. Now let me share another longer shopping story that will help you learn even more. Would you like to hear it? Let me now tell you a full, detailed story about a man named David. David is a 38-year-old father who lives in a quiet neighborhood with his wife, Lisa, and their 3 children. Every Friday evening, after he finishes work at the office, he goes grocery shopping. Friday is his shopping day because the supermarket near his home offers special discounts. David likes saving money and also enjoys shopping by himself. It gives him some quiet time and helps him prepare for the weekend. One Friday afternoon, David left his office at 5 o'clock. He got into his car and drove to the supermarket. Before he left, Lisa had given him a shopping list. She had written it clearly on a small piece of paper. The list included bread, milk, butter, pasta, tomatoes, chicken thighs, potatoes, apples, dish soap, and paper towels. David added a few more things in his mind. He thought about buying some yogurt for his kids and a pack of tea for himself. He reached the supermarket at around 5:30. The parking lot was a little full, but he found a spot near the entrance. He parked the car, took a cart, and walked through the automatic doors. The supermarket was large, clean, and quiet. There was soft lighting and clear signs above each aisle. He liked how organized it was. He looked at his list and started in the bakery section. In the bakery, he found many kinds of bread. There was white bread, brown bread, whole wheat bread, and sandwich rolls. David picked up one loaf of whole wheat bread because it was healthy. Next, he moved to the dairy section. He picked up a bottle of milk, a small pack of butter, and some low-fat yogurt. He also remembered the tea and picked a box of English breakfast tea. He liked to drink tea in the morning before going to work. After that, David went to the meat section. There were different types of meat: beef, lamb, fish, and chicken. He checked the chicken shelves and picked 2 trays of chicken thighs. He checked the expiry date on the label to make sure they were fresh. He also saw a special offer: buy 2 trays and get 1 small packet of chicken wings free. He smiled and added the wings to his cart. Then he walked to the produce section. He picked 6 red apples, 5 medium-sized tomatoes, and 1 large bag of potatoes. He checked each apple and tomato before placing them in the cart. He liked choosing fresh and clean produce. The store also had carrots, cucumbers, lettuce, and spinach, but they were not on the list, so he skipped them. Now it was time for the household items. David found dish soap in the cleaning aisle. There were many options, but he chose the same brand his wife liked. Then he looked for paper towels. He saw a pack with 4 rolls. It was on discount, so he took it. He double-checked his list. He had everything: bread, milk, butter, pasta, tomatoes, chicken, potatoes, apples, dish soap, paper towels, yogurt, and tea. His cart was full, but not too heavy. Before leaving, David walked past the snack aisle. He did not have snacks on the guy list, but he saw some plain crackers and thought the kids might enjoy them. He added a box to the cart. Then he went to the checkout counter. A young cashier named Emma smiled and said, "Good evening. Did you find everything today?" David replied, "Yes, everything was easy to find." Emma scanned all the items one by one. She placed them into bags while David watched the total on the screen. The final amount was $87. David took out his bank card and paid. The machine beeped, and the receipt came out. Emma gave it to him and said, "Thank you. Have a nice weekend." David replied, "Thank you. You too." He took his bags, placed them in his cart, and walked back to his car. He opened the trunk and packed the bags carefully so nothing would fall or break. Then he sat in the driver's seat and started the car. On the way home, he thought about dinner. He planned to cook pasta with tomato sauce and chicken. He knew his family would enjoy it. When he reached home, his wife opened the door and smiled. "You're back," she said. "Did you find everything?" David nodded and said, "Yes, and I also got some crackers for the kids." Lisa took one of the bags and said, "Great, let's put everything away." They worked together in the kitchen. David put the cold items in the fridge: the milk, butter, yogurt, and chicken. Lisa placed the bread in the bread box and the apples in a bowl on the counter. She checked the list and said, "You didn't forget anything." That's perfect. David smiled and said, I followed the list. Later that night, David cooked dinner. He boiled pasta in a pot, fried some tomatoes and onions, and added cooked chicken. He mixed it all together and served it with a slice of bread. The children sat at the table and said, This is delicious. Lisa smiled and said, Thank you, David. You did a great job. This simple story shows you how many useful phrases and words you can learn from a normal grocery shopping trip. Words like loaf of bread, cart, check the date, on sale, expiry date, and cashier are part of real-life conversations. You can also learn polite ways to speak in stores, like did you find everything? And yes, thank you. If you want to practice more, you can write your own shopping list in English. Try to say the names of foods in your kitchen. You can say, I have apples, I need rice, I want to buy chicken. You can also listen again to this story and repeat each sentence. Speak slowly and clearly. This will help your speaking and listening together. Now let me tell you another long shopping story. This one is about a young man named Brian who helped his grandmother with shopping on a Saturday afternoon. Brian is 25 years old. He lives in a small town with his grandmother, Margaret. Margaret is 70 years old and lives alone. She cannot walk long distances because of her knee pain. Brian visits her every weekend to help with housework and shopping. On this Saturday, Brian planned to go grocery shopping with Margaret. He arrived at her house at 9 o'clock in the morning. Margaret had already made a list of items she needed. She gave the list to Brian and said, Please buy fresh vegetables and fruits. Also get some bread and eggs. Brian looked at the list carefully. It was short but clear. It included carrots, onions, potatoes, apples, bananas, whole wheat, bread, eggs, cheese, and olive oil. After breakfast, Brian and Margaret walked slowly to the local market. The market was not far from the house, about 10 minutes by foot. Brian carried a small shopping bag, and Margaret used her walking stick. When they reached the market, Brian looked around to find the best stalls. He liked buying from the same sellers because they knew his grandmother. The vegetable seller was an older man named Mr. Clark. Brian greeted him politely. Good morning, Mr. Clark. How are you today? Mr. Clark smiled and said, Good morning, Brian. I have fresh carrots and potatoes. Just picked them this morning. Brian asked for 2 kilos of carrots and 3 kilos of potatoes. Mr. Clark weighed the vegetables and put them into paper bags. Then Brian went to the fruit stall. The fruit seller was a woman named Mrs. Brown. Brian said, Hello, Mrs. Brown. Do you have ripe bananas and apples today? Mrs. Brown nodded and said, Yes, these apples are very fresh. The bananas are sweet too. Brian chose 6 apples and a bunch of bananas. He checked the apples carefully to avoid any with bruises or spots. After paying, Brian put the fruits in his bag. Next, Brian and Margaret moved to the bakery stall. The baker, Mr. Smith, was busy baking bread. Brian asked for a loaf of whole wheat bread. Mr. Smith wrapped it carefully in a paper bag. Brian thanked him and paid. After that, they walked to the dairy stall. The dairy seller was Mrs. Green. Brian asked for a dozen eggs and a small block of cheese. Mrs. Green wrapped the cheese in white paper and handed over the eggs in a carton. Brian paid and added these items to his shopping bag. Before leaving the market, Brian stopped by a small stall selling olive oil. The seller was a young man named Tom. Brian said, Can I have a bottle of extra virgin olive oil, please? Tom gave him a 1-liter bottle. Brian looked at the price tag and gave the money. Then he put the bottle carefully in the bag. Brian and Margaret started walking back home. Margaret was happy to have fresh food for the week. She said, Thank you for helping me, Brian. It is difficult for me to shop alone now. Brian smiled and said, "You are welcome, Margaret. I enjoy helping you." When they reached the house, Brian unpacked the bags on the kitchen table. Margaret checked each item carefully. "Everything is perfect," she said. After that, Brian helped Margaret store the vegetables in the fridge and the fruits in a fruit bowl. He also placed the bread in the bread box. Brian noticed that Margaret's kitchen was clean and tidy. She liked to keep things organized. He said, "You have a nice kitchen, Margaret." She replied, "Thank you. I like it to be clean and simple." Later in the afternoon, Brian cooked a simple meal for them. He made a vegetable soup with carrots, onions, and potatoes. He added a little salt and pepper to the soup. Margaret said the soup tasted good and was warm and healthy. Brian felt happy to see her smile. They ate together and talked about their week. Brian told Margaret about his work at the bookstore. Margaret shared stories about her childhood. They laughed and enjoyed the time. This story shows the importance of helping family and the simple joy of cooking and eating together. It also includes many words and phrases related to grocery shopping. Words like stall, wrap, carton, extra virgin olive oil, and loaf of bread are useful to know. You can practice saying these words aloud to improve your pronunciation. Now think about your own shopping trips. What do you usually buy? Do you go to a big supermarket or a small market? Try to make a shopping list in English. For example, you can write, "I need rice, tomatoes, eggs, cheese, and tea." Practice reading your list aloud. You can also try to describe your shopping experience in English. For example, you can say, "I went to the market and bought fresh vegetables," or "The cashier was friendly and polite." Listening to stories like Brian's helps you understand natural conversations in English. When you listen, try to notice the names of foods, common phrases, and polite questions. Repeat the sentences slowly. This will help you hear the sounds and learn the rhythm of English speech. You can also write down new words and look up their meanings. Writing and listening together is a good way to improve. In real life, grocery shopping is an activity most people do every week. Knowing the easy words and phrases can make you feel more confident. It helps when you speak with sellers or ask questions about products. You can say, "How much does this cost?" Or, "Is this fresh?" These simple questions are useful and polite. Now I want to tell you about a woman named Emma. Emma is a busy mother who shops for her family every Saturday morning. She has 2 children and a husband. Emma likes to plan her shopping carefully to save time. She uses a shopping app on her phone to check prices and make a list. She also checks if the store has any discounts or special offers. One Saturday, Emma planned to buy ingredients for a special dinner. She wanted to cook roast chicken with vegetables. Before going to the store, she looked at her list. Chicken, carrots, onions, potatoes, green beans, salad lettuce, olive oil, salt, and pepper. Emma always buys fresh vegetables and meat. She believes fresh food is healthier and tastes better. Emma drove to the supermarket early in the morning. The store was busy with many customers. She took a shopping cart and started with the meat section. She looked for a fresh whole chicken. She checked the label for the weight and expiry. Anna is a woman in her early 30s. She works as a nurse and lives with her husband John in a small apartment. Anna often goes grocery shopping on weekends because she works during the week. One Saturday morning, Anna made a list of things she needed. On the list were tomatoes, cucumbers, bread, cheese, eggs, chicken breasts, rice, and some apples. Anna left her apartment at 10 o'clock. The supermarket near her home was usually crowded on weekends, but she did not mind. She liked to take her time shopping. When she entered the store, she took a shopping basket because she did not plan to buy many things. The store was bright and clean. Anna started by going to the vegetable section. She picked 5 tomatoes and 2 cucumbers. She checked that the tomatoes were red and firm. Then she moved to the bread aisle. Anna liked fresh whole wheat bread. She found a loaf and placed it in her basket. Next, Anna went to the dairy section. She looked for cheese and eggs. She chose a small pack of cheese and a dozen eggs. Anna checked the expiry date on the egg carton carefully. After that, she went to the meat counter. The line was long, so she waited patiently. When it was her turn, Anna asked the seller, "Are the chicken breasts fresh today?" The seller said, "Yes, they arrived this morning." Anna picked 4 pieces and thanked the seller. Then Anna walked to the rice aisle. She chose a small bag of white rice. She looked at the price to make sure it was not expensive. Finally, Anna went to the fruit section. She picked 6 apples that were shiny and firm. Anna put all the items in her basket and walked to the checkout. Added to you. The cashier, Anna greeted the woman and said, "Good morning?" The cashier smiled and asked if Anna had found everything she needed. Anna said, "Yes, thank you." The cashier scanned all the items and packed them carefully in plastic bags. Anna paid with cash and said goodbye. Anna carried her shopping bags to the car and drove home. At home, she helped her husband put the groceries away. They planned to cook chicken with rice and a fresh salad for dinner. Anna liked cooking healthy meals because she wanted to stay fit. Anna's story shows how to plan shopping. Making a list helps to remember everything you need. Checking the expiry date on food is important. Asking questions like, "Are these fresh?" is polite and useful. You can use these phrases in your own shopping. Now let us hear about Mark. Mark is a teacher and lives with his wife, Emma. Mark does not like busy stores. He prefers to shop late in the evening when the store is quieter. One Thursday night, Mark went to the supermarket after work. His list had bread, milk, cheese, eggs, chicken legs, carrots, onions, and bananas. When Mark arrived, he took a shopping cart. The store was quiet with few customers. Mark started at the dairy section. He picked a carton of milk and a block of cheese. Then he went to the bread aisle. Mark liked white bread, so he chose a fresh loaf. Next, Mark went to the meat counter. He asked the seller, "Are the chicken legs fresh today?" The seller said, "Yes, we got them this morning." Mark picked 6 chicken legs. After that, Mark went to the vegetable section. He picked 5 carrots and 3 onions. He checked that the vegetables were fresh and firm. Mark also went to the fruit section and picked 6 bananas. Mark then went to the checkout line. The cashier greeted him and asked if he had found everything. Mark said, "Yes, thank you." Mark paid with his card and thanked the cashier. Mark's story teaches us to shop when stores are less busy. This can make shopping faster and easier. It is good to check the quality of vegetables and fruit. You can say, "Are these fresh?" Or, "Can you help me find," when shopping. These sentences are helpful. Think about your own shopping. You can say, "I need fresh vegetables," or, "Can you help me find chicken breasts?" Practicing these sentences will help you speak English better. Writing about your shopping also helps improve your skills. Listening to stories like Anna's and Mark's helps you learn real English. You hear new words and phrases that people use every day. Words like cart, basket, expiry date, loaf, and checkout are common in shopping. Try to listen carefully and repeat the sentences to remember them. Now, let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah is a teacher. She lives with her husband, David. Sarah usually goes grocery shopping on Saturdays. One Saturday morning, Sarah made a list. On her list, she wrote milk, bread, eggs, butter, chicken, tomatoes, lettuce, potatoes, and apples. She wanted to buy fresh food for the week. Sarah left her house at 9 o'clock. The supermarket was not very busy at that time. She liked to neutrally shop when it was quiet. First, Sarah took a shopping basket. She went to the dairy section. She looked for milk and butter. She chose a carton of milk and a small pack of butter. She checked the dates on both packages to make sure they were fresh. After that, Sarah went to the bread aisle. She picked a loaf of whole wheat bread. Sarah liked whole wheat bread because it is healthy. Then she went to the vegetable section. Sarah picked some tomatoes and a head of lettuce. She checked that the tomatoes were firm and red. She looked for green and fresh lettuce leaves. After the vegetables, Sarah went to the meat counter. The line was long at the meat counter. Sarah waited patiently. When it was her turn, she asked the seller, "Do you have fresh chicken today?" The seller smiled and said, "Yes, it arrived this morning." Sarah picked 2 chicken breasts. She asked the seller to cut the chicken into smaller pieces. The seller did this carefully. Sarah thanked him. Next, Sarah went to the fruit section. She picked 6 apples. She looked for apples that were shiny and without bruises. Then Sarah went to the potato section. She chose a small bag of potatoes. She checked the price to make sure it was not too expensive. After that, Sarah went to the checkout. At the checkout, Sarah greeted the cashier. The cashier smiled and asked if she found everything. Sarah said, "Yes, thank you." The cashier scanned all the items and packed them into bags. Sarah paid with her card. She thanked the cashier and left the store. Sarah's shopping story shows us how to shop carefully. Making a list helps to remember all the things we need. Checking the freshness of food is very important. Asking questions at the meat counter is polite and helpful. You can practice these phrases when you go shopping. Now I want to tell you about Michael. Michael is an office worker. He lives with his wife, Lisa. Michael usually shops once a week. He likes to buy many things at once. One Sunday afternoon, Michael made a list. He wrote down bread, cheese, milk, eggs, chicken thighs, carrots, onions, bananas, and orange juice. Michael went to the supermarket at 2 o'clock. The store was busy with many customers. Michael took a shopping cart because he planned to buy many things. First, he went to the dairy section. He looked for milk and cheese. He picked a carton of milk and a block of cheddar cheese. He checked the expiry date on both. Then Michael went to the bread aisle. He chose a fresh loaf of white bread. He liked white bread with his breakfast. Next, Michael went to the meat section. The line was very long. Michael waited for 10 minutes. When it was his turn, he asked, "Are the chicken thighs fresh today?" The seller answered, "Yes, we received them this morning." Michael picked 6 chicken thighs and asked for them to be wrapped separately. The seller did this quickly. After the meat, Michael went to the vegetable section. He picked 5 carrots and 3 onions. He made sure they were fresh and firm. Then he went to the fruit section. Michael picked 6 bananas. He also chose a bottle of orange juice from the drinks aisle. Finally, Michael went to the checkout. At the checkout, the cashier greeted him with a friendly smile. Michael said, "Good afternoon." The cashier scanned the items and packed them carefully. Michael paid with cash. He thanked the cashier and left the store with his cart full of groceries. Michael's story teaches us about shopping in busy places. Sometimes the line is long, but we must wait patiently. It is important to ask questions about food freshness. You can say, "Are these fresh?" or "Can you help me find the chicken thighs?" These phrases are useful in stores. Now think about your own shopping trips. When you make a list, you can remember all the things you need. When you check dates and ask questions, you buy fresh food. Using simple phrases helps you talk to sellers clearly. Listening to stories like Sarah's and Michael's helps you hear these useful phrases. When you listen carefully, you learn new words like cart, basket, expiry date, loaf, checkout, and fresh. Repeat these words and sentences to practice your English. Try to write down your own shopping list in English. You can also write about a shopping trip you had. This practice helps improve both your listening and writing skills. Now let me tell you about James. James is an engineer. He lives with his wife, Emily. Every Friday evening, James does the grocery shopping. He likes to prepare meals for the weekend. On one Friday, James made a list before he went to the store. On the list, he wrote chicken breasts, rice, tomatoes, onions, garlic, cheese, yogurt, apples, bananas, and lettuce. James left his house around 5 o'clock in the evening. The supermarket was busy because many people shop after work. James took a shopping cart because he planned to buy many items. The first section he visited was the meat section. He looked for chicken breasts. He asked the meat seller, "Are these chicken breasts fresh?" The seller said, "Yes, they came this morning." James picked 4 chicken breasts. He asked the seller to cut the chicken into smaller pieces. The seller did this carefully. James thanked him. After that, James went to the rice and grains aisle. He looked for a bag of white rice. He picked a medium-sized bag that he knew was good quality. Then he went to the vegetable section. James picked 3 tomatoes, 2 onions, and a few cloves of garlic. He checked that the tomatoes were red and firm. He chose onions that were dry and had no soft spots. James took a small bunch of garlic and smelled it to make sure it was fresh. Next, James went to the dairy section. He picked a block of cheddar, cheese, and a small tub of plain yogurt. He checked the expiry dates to make sure they were not old. Then, James went to the fruit section. He picked 5 apples and 6 bananas. He chose apples that were shiny and free of bruises. The bananas were yellow and looked ripe. Finally, James went to the lettuce section. He picked 1 head of lettuce. He looked for green leaves that were fresh and crisp. Then he went to the checkout. At the checkout, James greeted the cashier politely. The cashier smiled and asked if he found everything he needed. James said, "Yes," and thanked the cashier. The cashier scanned all the items and packed them carefully into bags. James paid with his card and left the store. James's story shows the importance of making a list before going shopping. It helps to remember everything. It is also important to check the quality of the food. Talking to the seller politely helps when you need fresh meat or vegetables. You can practice these phrases, "Are these fresh?" Or, "Can you please cut this into smaller pieces?" These phrases help you communicate clearly. Now let me tell you about Emma. Emma is a nurse. She lives with her husband, Robert. Emma shops once a week on Sunday mornings. On one Sunday, Emma wrote a list. On the list were eggs, milk, bread, chicken thighs, carrots, cucumbers, oranges, cheese, and yogurt. Emma left her house early. She likes to shop when the store is quiet. She took a basket because she planned to buy only a few things. First, Emma went to the dairy section. She looked for eggs and milk. She picked a carton of 12 eggs and a carton of milk. She checked the expiry date on both. Then Emma went to the bread aisle. She picked a loaf of whole wheat bread. She likes whole wheat bread because it is healthy. After that, Emma went to the meat section. The line was short. Emma waited for her turn. She asked the seller, "Do you have fresh chicken thighs?" The seller answered, "Yes, we received them this morning." Emma picked 4 chicken thighs. She asked the seller to wrap them carefully. Then Emma went to the vegetable section. She chose 3 carrots and 2 cucumbers. She looked for fresh and firm vegetables. Emma then went to the fruit section. She picked 5 oranges. She checked that they were firm and heavy. She also went to the dairy section again to pick cheese and yogurt. She chose a block of cheddar cheese and a small tub of plain yogurt. Emma checked the expiry dates carefully. Finally, Emma went to the checkout. The cashier greeted her and asked if she found everything. Emma smiled and said yes. The cashier scanned all the items and packed them carefully. Emma paid with cash and left the store with her basket full of groceries. Emma's story teaches us about shopping when the store is quiet. It is easier to find fresh food and there are fewer people. Asking questions politely is important to get fresh meat or vegetables. You can practice saying, "Do you have fresh chicken today?" Or, "Can you please wrap it carefully?" These phrases help you communicate well in the store. Think about your own shopping trips. What do you usually buy? Do you make a list before you go? Making a list helps you remember everything. Checking expiry dates helps you buy fresh food. Asking questions helps you talk to the sellers. Practice these phrases when you listen to stories like Emma's and James's. When you listen to these stories, you learn useful words like basket, cart, expiry date, fresh, loaf, pack, and seller. Try to write down your shopping list in English. You can also write about your last shopping trip. Writing helps you remember new words and phrases. Listening and writing practice together improve your English faster. Now, I want to share a story about Michael. Michael works in an office. He lives with his wife, Sarah. Every Saturday morning, Michael goes grocery shopping. He likes to buy fresh food for the week. On this Saturday, Michael made a list on his phone before he left the house. The list had bread, milk, eggs, cheese, chicken wings, potatoes, carrots, onions, apples, and oranges. Michael reached the supermarket at 9 a.m. The store was not busy yet. He took a shopping cart because he planned to buy many things. First, Michael went to the bakery section. He looked at the different breads. He chose a loaf of white bread and a loaf of whole grain bread. He picked bread that looked fresh and soft. Then he went to the dairy section. He found milk and eggs. He picked a carton of 12 eggs and a liter of milk. He checked the expiry date on both to make sure they were good. Next, Michael went to the cheese section. He looked for cheddar cheese. He picked a block of medium cheddar cheese. After that, he went to the meat section. He wanted chicken wings. He asked the seller, "Are these chicken wings fresh?" The seller said, "Yes, they arrived this morning." Michael picked 1 kilogram of chicken wings. He asked the seller to wrap them well. After the meat section, Michael went to the vegetable aisle. He picked 5 potatoes, 4 carrots, and 2 onions. He chose vegetables that were firm and not soft. Then Michael went to the fruit section. He picked 4 apples and 6 oranges. He checked that the apples and oranges were fresh and not damaged. Finally, Michael went to the checkout. The cashier smiled and said hello. Michael said hello back. The cashier scanned all the items carefully and packed them into bags. Michael paid with his card and left the store. On his way home, Michael thought about the dinner he would cook. He planned to make baked chicken wings with roasted potatoes and carrots. Michael felt happy because he had everything he needed. This story teaches you how to use simple phrases when shopping. You can say, "Are these fresh?" to ask about food quality. You can say, "Can you wrap this well, please?" when you want the seller to pack something carefully. These phrases are useful and polite. When you use polite words, people will help you better. Now, let me tell you about Lisa. Lisa is a teacher. She lives with her husband, Mark. Lisa goes grocery shopping every Thursday after work. She likes to shop when the store is quiet. On one Thursday, Lisa made a list. On the list were chicken breasts, rice, spinach, tomatoes, onions, cheese, yogurt, bananas, and apples. Lisa left her school at 4 p.m. and went to the supermarket. When she arrived, she took a small basket because she did not plan to buy many things. First, Lisa went to the meat section. She looked for chicken breasts. She asked the seller, "Are these chicken breasts fresh today?" The seller answered, "Yes, they came this morning." Lisa picked 3 chicken breasts. She asked the seller to cut the chicken breasts into smaller pieces for cooking. The seller did so quickly. Next, Lisa went to the rice aisle. She looked for white rice. She picked a small bag that she liked. Then Lisa went to the vegetable section. She picked some fresh spinach, 3 tomatoes, and 2 onions. She looked carefully for fresh vegetables. She touched the spinach leaves to check if they were soft and green. After vegetables, Lisa went to the dairy section. She picked a block of cheese and a small tub of yogurt. She checked the expiry dates on both products to make sure they were still good. Then Lisa went to the fruit section. She picked 5 bananas and 4 apples. She looked for fruit that was fresh and ripe. When Lisa finished shopping, she went to the checkout. The cashier was friendly and asked if she found everything she needed. Lisa smiled and said yes. The cashier packed the groceries carefully and gave Lisa her receipt. Lisa paid with cash and thanked the cashier. Then she left the store and went home. Lisa's story shows that it is good to ask questions when shopping. Asking about freshness is important. You can say, "Are these fresh?" or "When did these arrive?" These questions help you buy good food. Also, checking expiry dates helps you buy safe food. You can practice saying, "Can you cut this into smaller pieces, please?" This is useful when you want help from the seller. Think about your own shopping habits. Do you make a list before shopping? Do you check food quality? Do you ask questions? These are good habits to practice. When you listen to stories like Michael's and Lisa's, try to repeat the phrases they use. This helps you learn useful English for shopping. You can also practice writing your own shopping list in English. Write the names of food you need. Write sentences like, "I want fresh tomatoes," or "I need 2 kilograms of rice." Writing helps you remember new words. Listening and writing practice together make learning easier. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the English Pod community. I hope the stories about grocery shopping helped you improve your listening and writing skills. Remember, practicing every day is the best way to get better at English. Try to use the phrases we talked about next time you go shopping or write your own shopping list in English. If you liked this episode, please press the like button and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more episodes to help you learn English in a fun and easy way. See you next time.